Dara Wells never imagined that her freedom would be sacrificed so her father could hold on to the last of his crumbling estate. But in the marble halls of the Callahan estate in upstate New York, a deal was signed, and her future was no longer hers. Before we begin, tell me this. Do you believe love can grow in a place where trust never had roots, where silence is deeper than any voice, and respect more powerful than desire? Remember to subscribe and press the notifications bell not to miss any story. Make yourself comfortable. Let's begin. The late autumn wind tumbled down from the Catskills, shaking trees bare and whispering through the empty hills like old ghosts. The black SUV climbed the winding road to the Callahan estate. Inside, Dara Wells sat alone. She didn't weep. She didn't blink. Her father had spoken that morning like a businessman finalizing a deal. Henry Callahan will take the land and keep you safe in return. As if she were livestock, a name on a dotted line. Her mother didn't resist. She held Dara's face for a moment, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "Be stronger than I ever could." The mansion appeared through the trees, glass, steel, and stone. Cold beauty, a monument to wealth. There were no flowers, no greeters, only a tall, stiff woman in a dark suit. Brenda, Henry's assistant. "Your room is ready." Dara stepped onto the gravel. She carried one suitcase. Her boots echoed against the tiles inside the grand foyer, polished, elegant, and heartless. Then a flash of red. Clara Bell. She floated into the room with heels sharp enough to stab. Red dress, perfect hair, eyes like knives. "So, you're the new deal," she said with a half smile. "Interesting choice." Dara didn't speak. She had learned early that silence can be armor. Clara studied her, then turned with a cruel smirk. Brenda led Dara upstairs. Her room was large, cold, neatly made. A tablet, a tray of untouched food, a window with a view of the river. An hour passed. Then came the knock. Henry Callahan stepped in, tall, clean-cut, dressed in a gray sweater. His voice was calm but tired. "This isn't what either of us wanted," he said. "This room is yours. No one enters without your permission, not even me." Dara's jaw tightened. "What do you expect from me?" "Nothing but honesty. If silence is your choice, I'll respect it." Then he left. Days passed. She refused the designer clothes Brenda laid out. She wore her old jeans, ate alone, said little, walked the estate trails at dawn. Clara whispered behind her back, "She's a shadow, not a wife." But Marlene, the older housekeeper, watched Dara differently. Her hands were rough, her eyes wise. One morning she left a note. "Silence doesn't mean surrender." Henry watched too. From his office window, he saw Dara moving through the gardens, always alone. He said nothing, sent nothing, but she began to feel his gaze, like a presence she couldn't explain. Then one day Clara acted, a cup of tea, laced with something mild, just enough to make her weak. Dara drank. Minutes later, her heart raced, her hands trembled. She collapsed. Marlene found her and ran to Henry without hesitation. Henry didn't pause. He carried Dara in his arms to his private medical suite, stayed by her side. Hours passed. When she opened her eyes, her voice was low. "Why? Did you do this?" He looked at her, honest, worn. "Because no one deserves to suffer alone, not even in silence." She turned her head, confused, but something stirred. Days later, her father arrived. Suit, folder, smile. "I've come with a new offer," he said. "My younger daughter, Jasmine. She could be useful here. A companion, a helper." Dara stepped forward, fire in her voice. "You sold me. Now her? Are we land to trade and water to sell?" Henry's voice cut like ice. "Escort him out. Don't let him return." That night, Clara tried one last time. She cornered Henry in the hall, leaned close, kissed him. Dara saw it all, silent, hurt. She walked away. Later, she sat by her window. Marlene poured tea. I don't want to be pitied. Marlene nodded. Then be remembered. In the library, Dara found a box. Hidden letters, one from Henry. He had defied a military order, refused to bomb a village. He had been reassigned, quietly punished. She touched the paper. Her chest ached. This man was not who she thought. Then the storm came. Floods washed out roads. Dara didn't wait. She grabbed a medical kit and rode with Marlene to the local gym where displaced families waited. She bandaged wounds, hugged children, stayed through the night. The shelter was a makeshift haven of chaos. Rows of army cots lined the gym floor. The air smelled of wet clothes, disinfectant, and fear. People moved in slow, broken rhythms, some holding on to hope, others just breathing. Dara moved from person to person like a shadow, efficient, quiet, tender. Her sleeves were soaked through. Her knees ached from crouching, but she didn't stop. A boy needed his wound cleaned. A mother needed someone to hold her infant while she changed. A young girl kept crying silently in the corner until Dara offered her a biscuit and a hand to squeeze. She hadn't eaten since morning. She hadn't rested since yesterday. Marlene passed by with another tray. You need to sit, she murmured. Dara shook her head. I will. When they do, she bent to adjust a splint on a teenager's leg, her hands trembling. Then she stood, moving to the next cot. That's when she heard it. She doesn't look tired to me, a sharp voice rang from behind. Dara turned her head slightly. An older woman with a long gray braid sat with her arms crossed. Her eyes were hard, skeptical. That's the governor's wife, right? The woman continued, speaking loud enough for others to hear. Here for a photo op? Dara blinked. The woman laughed coldly. Funny how the cameras didn't come. Or maybe she's just here to soothe her conscience. Someone nearby chuckled nervously. Another man muttered something too soft to catch. But Dara felt every syllable like a bruise. She didn't answer. She simply turned back and handed a juice box to a toddler. But the damage had already been done. As she moved to the corner of the room to collect more supplies, her legs nearly gave out. Her breath hitched. A tight band began to form around her chest, squeezing tighter with each step. Marlene found her stacking blankets. Dara, she said softly, come sit. I'm fine, Dara whispered. No, you're not. The world had begun to blur. Her hands were shaking now. Her chest felt heavy, like her lungs had forgotten how to breathe. Without a word, she slipped outside through the side door. The cold slapped her the moment she stepped into the rain. Fat drops poured from the sky, soaking her in seconds. But she welcomed it. She wanted the sting. She needed something to match the storm inside her. She leaned against the brick wall, then slowly slid down until she was sitting in a puddle. Her knees tucked to her chest, her arms wrapped around herself. And for the first time since she arrived at Callahan Estate, since the deal had been signed, since Clara's poison and her father's shameful visit, Dara cried. Not pretty, cinematic tears, real ones, ugly, trembling sobs that clawed their way from her chest. She had held so much for so long. Her silence had been her armor. Her dignity had been her only shield. But even the strongest shields crack. She didn't cry because of the woman's words. She cried because she was tired, so deeply tired of trying to prove she was worthy of her own story. She cried for the girl she used to be, who once believed love was something gentle. She cried because she no longer knew what was left of herself underneath the silence. She didn't hear the door open behind her. She didn't see Marlene approach until a warm coat was laid over her shoulders. Marlene didn't speak at first. She simply sat beside her in the mud. I'm sorry, Dara whispered hoarsely. For what? Marlene asked softly. For not being stronger. Marlene gave a small, knowing smile. Oh, child, that's the strongest thing you've done all day. Dara sniffled. They think I'm a fraud. They don't know you, Marlene replied. They only know the headlines. The wife who came in silence. They don't see how you bleed. Dara pressed her forehead against her knees. I don't know who I am anymore. And that's okay, Marlene said gently. You don't need to know yet. You're still building her. The rain kept falling. It soaked them both, but neither moved. Then came the footsteps. Steady, familiar. Henry. He stood just a few feet away, rain dripping from his hair, his shoulders stiff under his soaked coat. He said nothing at first. He just looked at her. Really looked. Marlene rose slowly. She placed her hand briefly on Dara's shoulder and gave Henry a long, unreadable glance before stepping away. Dara didn't look up. She didn't want to see pity in his eyes, but what she heard was something entirely different. You don't have to be strong tonight, Henry said softly. Not with me. She looked up then, startled by the tenderness in his voice. He crouched beside her, ignoring the mud soaking through his trousers. I heard what happened, he said. I came as fast as I could. She blinked at him, the rain washing the tears from her cheeks. I didn't want you to see me like this, she said. I'm glad I did, he replied. She frowned. Why? Because I've only ever seen your strength, and it's beautiful. But this, he reached out and gently took her hand. This is brave too. Her lips trembled. I don't know how to hold it all anymore, she confessed. The past, the silence, the things I never got to say. You don't have to, he said. Not alone. They sat in the rain, neither caring any more about being soaked or cold. Do you know what I saw when you were kneeling beside that child today? Henry asked. She shook her head. I saw someone who gave everything she had, not for credit, not for praise, but because she couldn't bear to see others suffer. He looked down at her hand in his. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Dara. Not even to me. A sob escaped her lips, quieter now. I just want to matter, she whispered. You do, he said firmly. More than you know. To this town. To me. She looked up at him, eyes wide, searching, and for a long moment they simply stared at each other. Not as governor and wife, not as strangers bound by a deal, but as two people on the edge of something real. I was afraid, she said quietly, that if I let go, I'd disappear. Henry leaned forward then, their foreheads nearly touching. You didn't disappear, he murmured. You survived, and every day I see you more clearly. She closed her eyes. Let the rain wash over her. Let his words fill the empty places. Then she opened them again, and for the first time she didn't feel like a shadow. She felt seen. They stayed like that until the rain began to soften, until the sky shifted from gray to silver, until the first sign of dawn peeked through the clouds. Marlene stood by the door, watching. She didn't interrupt. She simply smiled softly and walked back inside, because she knew something had just begun. The next day a promotion came. Washington, power, prestige. He declined. At a town meeting he stood with Dara beside him. I'm staying, not for politics, for the people, for her. And then, finally, she took his hand. The house had fallen into a cold, echoing silence since the storm passed. The kind of silence that only lingered after something sacred had been broken. And in that silence, Clara stood near the staircase, her eyes pinned to the landing above where Dara had just passed with a stack of blankets folded in her arms. Clara's jaw clenched. It wasn't just Henry's affection that Dara had stolen. It was his attention, his care, the subtle softening in his tone whenever Dara spoke, the shift in the way he lingered when she was near. Clara had been watching it all unravel like stitches pulling loose in a dress she'd sewn herself. She hadn't meant to hate Dara, not at first, but obsession has a way of curling itself into grief. Clara didn't just want Henry. She needed him. She needed him to see her again. Like before. Like before that storm, before Dara came walking into the estate, with muddy shoes, a guarded smile, and strength that Clara could neither understand nor match. Clara's hands trembled as she heard Dara's footsteps descending the stairs. Each step brought with it the weight of everything Clara feared. Being invisible, forgotten. She moved quickly, too quickly. Dara, she called, her voice high and strangely hollow. Dara paused midway down the staircase and looked up, surprised. Yes? There wasn't time to explain. Clara's hand came forward in a sudden, jarring push. Dara's world tilted. The stack of blankets flew from her hands. Her foot slipped. She gasped, a sharp, terrified sound, and tumbled backward, her arms flailing in the air. Time slowed. Her back slammed against the wooden stairs. Her head cracked against the railing. And then everything went black. 2 hours later, Henry's voice was hoarse from yelling her name. He hadn't been in the house when it happened. He'd gone to town to gather more supplies for the shelter. But when the housekeeper called, her words trembling over the phone, "It's Dara." She fell down the stairs. He nearly left his car in the middle of the road. The paramedics had already come and gone. Dara had been conscious for a few seconds but drifted in and out. Henry stood outside her hospital room now, gripping the doorframe as if it might steady his own collapsing heart. "I didn't even hear her scream," whispered one of the volunteers to another. "She could have died." The words punctured him like cold nails. Henry stepped into the room. The soft beeping of the monitor greeted him like a fragile heartbeat. Dara lay on the bed, pale, her forehead bandaged, her curls matted from dried blood, her hand loosely bandaged from the impact. He moved closer, unable to stop the ache in his chest. "I should have been here," he murmured, brushing a curl away from her eyes. But Dara didn't wake. What Henry didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that the house's security cameras had recorded everything. The revelation. The next morning, Henry was called into the security office. The estate had a modest surveillance system installed a year ago after some community threats. Henry had forgotten about it, but one of the guards, a retired police officer named Caleb, had checked the footage, just in case. Caleb didn't say anything. He simply hit play. And there she was, Clara, standing at the top of the stairs, waiting. Then the push. Henry's blood ran cold. He couldn't breathe as he watched Dara fall, her body limp, tumbling like a rag doll down the hard wooden steps. The moment repeated in his head in sickening detail. The way Clara didn't run to help. The way she froze, eyes wide but mouth pressed into a hard line. He left the room without a word. They found Clara in the garden. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply stared at Henry as he approached, her hands folded in front of her like a child waiting for discipline. "You pushed her," Henry said, voice trembling with betrayal. "I didn't mean," she began, but he shook his head. No more excuses." "Henry, you could have killed her." The sirens sounded in the distance. Clara looked toward them, then back at Henry. "You loved her," she said quietly, "even before you knew it." He didn't respond. When the officers placed her in handcuffs, Clara didn't resist. But as she was led away, she turned to Henry one last time. "I'm so sorry, Dara. I should have protected you." "I fell," she said weakly, trying to remember. "Clara, she pushed you," he confirmed softly. "We have the footage. She's gone now." Dara's face didn't change, but her hand tightened in his. She exhaled, shaky but steady. "To trust what I feel when I'm with you, even if it scares me, even if it's slow." A smile, small but honest, grew on his lips. "Then I'll meet you there, step by step, breath by breath." They sat like that for a long time. No more words, just presence. The warmth of their hands, the rhythm of their breathing, the quiet promise of something real. Because in the end, love didn't arrive for them like lightning. It arrived like morning light, gradual, patient, unstoppable. She smiled. "You didn't buy me. You helped me find myself. He leaned in. Their foreheads touched. No vows, no fireworks. Just presence. Just truth. Because love, real love, doesn't need a stage. It only needs two people who stay. Years passed. A school was named in her honor. Marlene, now gray-haired, rocked on the porch. Their daughter played barefoot in the grass. One night, Dara and Henry sat by the water. The moon cast silver ribbons over the still surface of the Hudson River. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels sacred, like the world is holding its breath. They sat on the old stone bench Henry had restored months ago, side by side, a gentle wind brushing against them. Dara clutched a cup of warm tea, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "Did you ever imagine love like this?" she asked softly, her voice nearly lost in the breeze. Henry turned his head toward her. His profile was outlined by moonlight. "No," he admitted. "You didn't become my wife by force. You became my peace." He paused, exhaled, and then turned his body fully toward her. For once, the guarded calm in his features gave way to something raw, something tender. "I need to say something I should have said a long time ago." Dara turned to face him, her eyes open but unreadable. Henry looked down at his hands. They were steady, but his voice wasn't. "At first, when you came to this house, I didn't want you here. I didn't want anyone here. I thought you were just another price I had to pay for duty. But you didn't behave like anyone else. You didn't beg. You didn't flatter. You didn't try to be what I expected. You were just you, and I couldn't stop noticing." He swallowed. The words felt like stone and breath all at once. "Every time I watched you walk through those halls, quietly, proud, steady, I saw strength. Real strength. Not the kind I used to pretend to have when I wore medals and gave orders, but the kind that changes everything without raising his voice." Dara's grip on her teacup softened. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Henry leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on hers. "I fell in love with you in silence, in the way you cared for strangers without asking for credit, in the way you held your own dignity when people whispered about you, in the way you stood up to your father, to me, even when you were still healing. And I've been terrified every day that you'd leave before I found the courage to tell you." Her eyes welled, but the tears didn't fall. Her hands trembled now. "I love you, Dara Wells," he said, his voice firm and clear. "Not because you're beautiful, even though you are. Not because you saved my reputation, though you did. But because you saw me before I remembered who I was. You looked at me, not with fear, not with expectation, but with truth. And you gave me the chance to become a man worthy of that truth." Dara inhaled shakily. "Henry, I've failed a lot of people," he said quickly. "I've walked away from things I should have fought for. I've kept quiet when I should have spoken. But I will not let this go unsaid. I love you. I love the sound of your footsteps in the morning. I love the way your eyes hold storms and peace at the same time. I love how your silence taught me how to listen. Life lesson. Sometimes we're thrown into places we didn't choose. But those moments can lead us to the people who see us for who we truly are. Love isn't about power. It's about presence, about showing up, again and again. Dara didn't fall in love because she was rescued. She loved because she was respected. Henry didn't love because she was silent. He loved because she stood tall, even when the world tried to make her small. So I ask you, what lesson did this story leave in your heart? Was it about dignity, trust, courage? If this story touched you, write the word strength in the comments below. Let's remind each other that even in the quietest moments, our voices matter. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next story.